CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thank you for tuning in. We've got an episode today where we're going to meet Matthew Beach, and he's an engineering and maintenance manager. He's had probably around a decade in the industry in that or very similar capacities, and we connected online. We were chopping it up kind of with comments, and we thought it would be great to record an episode just before we get to the end of the year here. So, Matt, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah,
Honor.
it's what's fun for me when somebody reaches out and they kind of talk about some of the things they've done, where they've been, and what they want to talk about. It gets me excited because then it's not me thinking about it and just, like all my righteous stuff, because I'm over here trying to help the whole industry. But what's cool about these stories that we can get is we get your views and your experiences and observations, and it gets people thinking. So that's why I like to have people that are there doing the job. They've been on the plant floor. They've dealt with frontline workforce, empowering their doers to be better. And I just want to talk about all that today. So,
Yeah. And I like
first,
I like what you're doing because I still see when I watch that I still see like there's still people out there with passion, and there's still hope for our industry, because as long as you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep the people hungry for more information. And people like me, like how I found you, is like I'm going to seek out people that are doing that. So that's what I love about what you're doing, and the people that you've had on. So, and that's
I
what made me want to jump on is, I want to be able to see if I can make an impact and touch somebody too.
absolutely, man. And I appreciate that more than I can even express with words, man. So let's
Yeah.
get into it a little bit. So,
Okay.
one of the first things I wanted to ask about is when you look at the industry as a whole, kind of building on what you just said, there's different trends that we tend to see, right? We see it online, we hear about it with people we talk about at conferences, we're talking to our colleagues, people that are our direct reports, on and on like this. Are there trends that you're seeing in the maintenance space overall lately that are concerning when it comes to education and keeping up with best practices in maintenance?
Yeah, I think the just top line is the people that want to lead maintenance organizations is a trend is trending down. Like a lot of people, I don't feel like want to lead that maintenance organizations, or really, you know, any operational leadership is getting very immature, weak in areas. And I think, I have some opinions on how I feel it kind of stemmed, and where that started happening. I remember, back, when I first got my start in the manufacturing world in early 2000s. um, you know, I I looked at maintenance and I was like, I want to be there. Like that is like the ultimate spot to be. Just being a maintenance technician. Oh, and to be a reliability engineer. When I heard of that, I was like, wow, I want to do that. But I could never get into maintenance. Could never get into it. It was always like, that's where your elite people were. The people that have been in an organization for a long time. They've worked their way up, and even the leadership of the maintenance organizations at that time were very high valued people. I really looked up to them, and I feel like now it's kind of it's gone now. People don't want to have those leadership roles. People just don't even want to be into maintenance. And that's a struggle for the leaders. So now we have to figure out ways of how we're going to attract people. How do we keep people in these roles? How do we attract them into the role, for one, and then how do we keep them there? So you have to change the how our thought processes is how we do things now versus how we did things maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We got to do things differently, and that's a challenge of a leader every day. Is how do you keep your team engaged, moving forward in the positive direction, and I think it's different now. I don't know. Again, I think 4 or 5 years ago, the industry changed. Not
Yeah.
just the maintenance industry, but many industries, and it allowed in my this here. I'm going to go on a tangent here, if I haven't already, and this is where I think the industry as a whole, manufacturing as a whole, and it's probably affected other industries as well, is we had open positions, so we just filled them with anything that we could fill with. It was a pulse. You had some background, whether it was in production or maintenance or reliability, supply chain, HR, whatever industry it might have been or role it was, and it allowed folks that maybe we wouldn't have allowed into the role. It allowed those people to get into that role. Now you have very immature young leadership, maybe didn't have the training or the mentors that I had, that I was blessed to have years ago and still now. So I think now we're getting. I think what's going to happen now, maybe 5 years and 10 years now we have younger, immature leaders leading people that they're not going to get the training or the mentoring that they need in order to build them up into those leadership roles in 5 and 10 years from now. I think we're going to see a bigger impact than what we're seeing now from a leadership standpoint in the next 5 and 10 years. It's going to get bigger. The problem's going to expand, I think, over the next few years.
So one thing we were trading texts about, whatever you want to call it, messages, was this skilled trades gap, and that's kind of related to that, where there's less interest into going into the trades, and I think the trades directly relates to maintenance environments of literally any kind.
Hmm.
And there's a little bit of a resurgence. I don't know,
Yeah.
that's kind of a strong word, but there's a little bit more interest that we're
Yep.
seeing from the incoming generation, and that's hopeful. And there's a lot of people out here all over the internet and throughout, the world, that are chirping about it. They're
Hmm.
shouting from the mountaintops, and they're trying to make a difference there. When we talk more specifically, though, about the reliability engineering space, the maintenance management space, maintenance and reliability best practices, what I think is probably trending, or we're trying to get it to trend, is getting those types of technicians that might have come in. Maybe they're not in leadership, but getting them to turn that corner and take what you've been doing and add in the education, the
Yeah.
certification, to maybe, a CMRP certification or a CMRT certification, so that you can really pound in some of that knowledge from years past. Because a lot of that's not going to change, but we don't want people to ignore it. So I think some leaders out there, that I think we both probably know, are trying to encourage those younger, less mature from a maintenance perspective, or whatever you want to call it, encouraging them to get into these programs and learn more. And another thing, one of the reasons so many people do podcasts and blogs and digital magazines around this space, is so that those individuals have that learning. So I haven't asked the question yet. So the question is this: when it comes to the technology, like CMMS platforms, it might be EAM, do you find that that's a good resource within an organization to foster that kind of program implementation? What I mean by that is, do the younger people have a tendency to adopt the technology, and that gives us a way forward to help them kind of mature in being a
Yeah.
part of the process?
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you think 20 years ago, probably, well, even today, I mean, I still see organizations that are still using paper,
Yeah.
printed out by their CMMS systems. You know, that's the people have changed. They don't operate off pieces of paper anymore. It is iPads, cell phones, even laptops are outdated at this point. I remember one organization. It was the greatest thing just to have laptops for all the technicians because they couldn't get a tablet for our CMMS system that we use. So we use a computer or a laptop for everybody. That's great. But just as CMMS systems has evolved, people have evolved as well, and they have to adapt to what that technology is that they've brought up with, and it's tablets, iPads, cell phones. If you can get the CMS systems on the tablets, your work order process is going to be much more effective and efficient versus the pieces of paper.
Yeah.
And I think that's evolved. When you talk about technology, I think CMMS systems are technology, and they're good ones, and there's not so good ones. And then there's the really good ones that are listening to what we're talking about, and they're adapting. They're listening to their customer, and they're like, hey, we should get this on a tablet. We should make sure they can get it on a cell phone.
Yeah.
And they can still print it if they want. Because there's still going to be those situations that you need to print something for an auditor or something like that. That's great, but from the day-to-day users and the customers, get it on a tablet for them.
Yeah.
Get away from the paper.
I agree. I agree. And I think, in fairness to some of those environments where they do print those out, that can be a strategy to make sure we're getting the inputs that we need. And I'm kind of okay with that. But I agree with you that the technology should meet the front line where they're at, because
Hmm.
that's that's the most important part. If we're leveraging this tool, a CMMS, to see, track, and manage what's happening throughout our plant to the specific assets, on and on like this, tracking safety incidents, everything, right? If you're not getting the inputs, you cannot possibly get the outputs that you want. So I want to ask about the front line versus kind of leadership, almost not seeing one another in how we make these decisions to bring in the technology. Or maybe a better question is, why is it so hard to, one, get leadership to approve bringing in technology, and
Yeah,
two, or maybe changing technology that's just not being utilized by the front line, and two, how do we get frontline workers to actually engage and stay consistent on how they leverage the platform that you do have?
yeah. And I think it's to the original point I was trying to make is that maturity level of that leadership now is that they're not communicating with their customers. If I'm a maintenance manager, or just say even a maintenance supervisor, and I'm not engaging with my technicians of what their needs and their wants are in order to accomplish their role, that's not good leadership. And if I'm a maintenance manager and I'm not listening to my customers, who are the people that are operating the equipment, and their needs, then I'm not doing my role as a maintenance manager. And likewise, each role has a part where they have to know who their customers are. And I think that's a gap, because if you're in that leadership role where you're able to pull the trigger on a new CMMS system, you have to be listening and understanding who your customers are and their needs. And if the need is, if they're a, I wouldn't even say if they're a younger generation maintenance organization, they're probably going to be looking for something that's more, you know, web based, cloud based, that they can pull up the information from their cell phone or from their tablet. I think I wouldn't even say that's generational right now. I think that's just where the industry is. That's what you need to be looking at. But
Yeah.
again, I think it goes back to understanding your customer. And if you're, again, no matter what leadership role you're in, if you don't understand your customer, you're not going to get them what they need. You're
Yeah.
not going to get
Yeah.
them. You're going to provide them with something that what you thought they needed, but that's just not, that's lack of communication with each other.
Yeah, and I think everybody wants that to improve, and I also think that that's going to be a constant thing. It kind of ebbs and flows where
Mhm.
sometimes leadership is truly receptive and available to hear this messaging from the maintenance manager and their team. Maybe they bring in a lead and they make a presentation and it resonates. It makes sense. And that might often be because they, you and whoever else is making the presentation with you is using the right language, right?
Yeah,
Like some kind of meaningful presentation for leadership that is kind of in the realm of how they look at the business as a whole. And then the other way around, we do see these periods of time or these moments within different organizations where leadership is kind of more interested in looking at what's the front line really doing. I think one big advantage that or a good practice that could be leveraged for that is when leadership goes down to the plant floor, spends time with the
yeah,
team simply to observe. You don't even have to bother them or
right.
disrupt their work and start to see what's really happening because then it might translate. And I also think one of the hard things about talking about this is that we're not trying to crush leadership as much as we're trying to say, hey, this is actually really important. This is part of your business. And I think it's a
Yep.
revenue contributor. Do you think there's a way to answer this question where we're saying, okay, a CMMS platform is here to empower our team. Our team, let's say, for example, has a good culture and process in place. And now, as a result of having that CMMS, we can show leadership how maintenance is a revenue contributor or enabler to the business.
Yeah, I think um, there's ways of doing that, but I don't want. I say I don't want it. I don't want the business thinking now like, okay, well I can use maintenance as a profit center now, because I can see all the money that they're saving. That's not. I don't want to get false impressions here. Again, I would be cautious of that, just because I don't want it to turn into, maintenance should not be a profit center. Although when you start showing some big gains, once you really start following, if you have a maintenance and reliability roadmap, you start following that and everything starts clicking. Your people are engaged. They're following the mission. They're following the vision. The strategy's being executed. You're going to start seeing some big gains, savings in your maintenance budgets, your labor budgets, your turnover, and it's going to be like, wow, now I can start shaving headcount, or I can reduce that maintenance budget, or I don't need to spend all that money in reliability now. So yeah, I think there's, I mean, I look at it that way, and
Yeah.
if you're in that leadership role, you might be looking at it at a different way. So I don't know. I go
It's
both
a
ways on it right now. So
it's like a balancing act, right? Like
yeah,
it's a balancing act to even talk about it because if we're overly direct about it, as helpful as that can be, uh, it kind of feels like to some folks that we're coming in hot, and we don't really want to do that, even though we're that passionate about it. And that comes down to a lot of things around communication, learning how to develop and maintain influence so that you don't have power struggles between
right.
people on the plant floor and people that are in the offices on the second floor, whatever you want to call that. Do you pardon me, sorry about that. um how how do you think maintenance makes the biggest contribution to the throughput or production, because we were talking a little bit about that, where does it really happen in your view, from where you sit when you see everything going?
Hmm.
Where do they make the biggest contribution to production? Is it in the ability to respond to demand work orders, or does it really show up in these reliability best practices?
I think it happens a little bit of both, but if I'm going to go with the biggest, I would say it's really starts at the planning and the scheduling piece of it, and then how we execute that work. Because how we plan that, it could be a direct relation of how we execute that. So if it's a really poor planned work order, probably going to execute that poorly. If I schedule it on the wrong day during production, well, I can't do that job now or run production. Now the job either doesn't get done when we hoped it was going to get done when we scheduled it. Now we forget about it. Now it turns into emergency, the line's down. So I really think it starts at that planning and the scheduling and then the execution phase. Um,
Mm.
but if I think about like where I think there's a big gap in um, how we perceive maintenance as a whole, maintenance and reliability as a whole, is it's a service we provide. We provide a service to the production team. So if a maintenance organization doesn't understand that they provide a service for production, um, there's going to be problems there. And I've seen this and I've experienced this. Um, and I try and make the analogy for people is, when you take your car to get an oil change, they provide you a service, right? That's a maintenance, a preventative maintenance that's just being done on your vehicle. They provided you with a service. So when you call maintenance to provide you with a service, you expect that to be done. If I
Mhm.
have whatever my issue is, I expect that to be resolved. I mean, that's good customer service. How you present yourself when you come to a line call, if it's an emergency, how you present yourself as a technician, even as maintenance leadership is how I come to that line. And it's the fifth time you've called me today, and I'm annoyed now. Guess what's going to happen next time? They're not going to call you, and that
Mm.
line's going to struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle. Now your throughput's down. So now you're suffering. And then, or worst case, the person quits. Like, I'm not going to deal with this attitude anymore. This is poor customer service from maintenance I get all the time. I'm just not going to call them. That reflects poorly on their job and their output. They don't want that. They take a lot of pride in what they do and their numbers. They're not going to be part of that anymore. They're going to leave. So just in
Yeah.
turnover, how the customer service that we provide our production team has a domino effect. Not only does it affect throughput and the bottom line, but it does affect through turnover for our employees. It affects morale, and in a lot of cases anymore, OEE is morale driven. I can have the best running equipment, but if it shuts off and I'm having a bad day, I might just take my time going over there to push that start button or to clear that jam because maintenance doesn't care. Why should I? So
Wow.
I think I think we play a huge role, bigger than what I think most organizations feel the maintenance department delivers. We play a huge role in that throughput, and it takes everybody. And I'm not saying that production doesn't play a role in it. We all have an important part in it, but maintenance can help steer the direction of the facility, either positive or negatively.
Yeah, I keep thinking about everything you're saying, and it's really kind of delicate. It seems like it's delicate, the balance, or whatever we want to call it. Because if you have a solid culture and the processes are in place, those things like, kind of mindset about what you do, if they're off just a little bit, it sets a domino effect, like you were saying, and it ruins everything. I
Hmm.
think part of that has to do with the unfortunate tendency for people to, like you say, refuse to engage because they've encountered too much resistance in those interactions, right? An operator
Yeah.
did this, had a problem, maintenance comes over, and they're like, yeah, this is the fifth time you've done this week. And it starts to become this blame game.
Yep.
And that's not going to help anybody,
No.
because we still have the problem
Right.
with the machine.
Yeah.
And sure, maybe the operator, took a chance, maybe, did a setting that was wrong, ran the different material, and it's an annoyance to the maintenance person. But if we can look at it as, hey, we've got a problem, our jobs are together to solve the problem and get you back to producing so that I can go maintain something else, because
Absolutely.
this disruptive repair kind of sets things in motion in a direction that we don't want to go. I mean, that really is all about culture, communication. And I mean, just real quick, I want to do a shout out to somebody, JD Solomon, and it's communicating with finesse. That's something I encourage everybody to check out, read those things, because if you start to not just study those things, but incorporate them
Hmm.
and be a little bit fearless about wanting to build that part of your culture out within an organization. This applies to everybody. We're spending out here. We're going big, right?
Yep.
That stuff, that mushy stuff, human stuff. My buddy Bob Latino, he's at Prelical Solutions. We say human stuff, and we have a lot of fun with it. But that is what makes the difference. These technologies, your CMMS, your AI, whatever that really is, none of those things are magic silver bullets that are just going to solve things. You
Right.
have to have your people in place, working well together. They have to be able to come to their boss or a colleague and be somewhat direct, but maybe not aggravated. And they have to know that this is going to be received as an opportunity to solve a problem. It's just interesting stuff to me, because I don't think we can solve it. I think we can just keep talking about it so that people get thinking about it. And that's why we're here.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when it comes to CMMS, there are a lot of fallacies that get promoted when it comes to like marketing and trying to get people to look at different companies. Are there any of those things that you see where, you'll see something and you're just like, nope, that's not it, and it's just kind of uh, a fake shiny thing to get people to buy?
Um, I don't see that just with CMMS systems. I see that with people, um, processes, equipment. I see it with cars. I mean, just cars. You see it on TV every day.
Yeah,
It's fake. I don't. I don't want fake. And it is just like I'm gonna go with um, your podcast. I've been asked to do a few podcasts. I'm like, that doesn't align with what I want to do and what I feel is important. So I align myself with you, because it's not fake. It's real. Like these are real things happening every single day. Doesn't get either one of us promoted by any means. It's just talking about what's affecting our industry. So when I haven't really seen. I mean, to answer your question around CMMSs, I haven't really seen anything that has been out there that says that would say either way is fake or tears me away. But there's certain things if I'm looking for a CMMS, and I've looked for probably 3 to 4 in the last 10 years. Not a
mm,
lot, but that's huge when you're talking about a CMMS system or either purchasing a new one and getting rid of an old one. That's a lot.
yeah,
There's years of data in an old one that you got to put into a new one, so it's a big job. So there's certain things that I look for, things that systems haven't been able to do for me or my customers in the past. Like, can it do this? And it's like, oh, we've never been asked for that to do that. Then I'm probably already turned off. If you've never been asked to do a basic, can it track mean time to repair? Oh, we've never been asked to do. Okay, that's end of discussion then, because I don't know who you're selling it to, and they're not asking for a mean time to repair. But there's been some good ones out there that you and I've talked about, that I've had experience with, and they're top notch. That
Yeah.
top notch stuff,
Yeah.
and they might have been developing their system when I asked for, can you do this, and they're like, well, we've never been asked to do that, but give me about 5 hours, and I'll see if I can do something for you and see if this is what you want. Okay. It only takes 5 hours to develop that, and you're just going to do it? Okay, great. That's customer service. It gets back to the providing me or our customers with good customer service. And that's what I look for. That's not fake to me. That's like
Yeah.
you're building your brand.
Well,
Um,
that's one of the big opportunities that every single CMMS provider out there has, and they do, I think they all try to do something with it. It's just not easy. And like you were saying, it sounded like it was really easy, but it's a challenge. So it kind of reminded me of all the stuff that we're both passionate about this, and so many people out in the CMMS world, the vendors, the providers, they're trying to do great stuff, but they're also in so many different environments. They would then, start to develop things that are afterthoughts. Maybe they overlook them, and they shouldn't
mhm,
necessarily be faulted for that, because they started with, this is what we do. This is the problem that we're going to solve. Yes, we are a CMMS, but that's a really big space, and everybody works differently. So if you take, let's say, for example, 10 or 20 different manufacturing type environments, all different companies, they're going to have different working styles. Then, if you start moving out into their various sites, I like to call those locations sites, physical plant locations.
mhm.
They might have 12 across the United States. Well, if you have 12 of those, there's going to be differentiation in how each of them work. And that can become a real slippery slope for CMMS providers in how do we develop that. So they have to try to do something where they can trick that out on the back end, so it's not overwhelming for the clients that use it to go and figure out how to configure it. This is why they have customer success departments, and they have people in training, they have people in implementation. What I'm usually looking at when it comes to that whole approach is what kind of expertise they have
Yeah.
on their front lines to their clients that can actually understand them, or at a minimum really listen to your clients and understand if this is a good fit in the first place. I think that's what I was talking about when we get these kind of things in the marketing realm that look and seem like this, and then we find out later that it's just not that at all. That's one of the things that I'm always concerned about. And I don't know if that's, I want to be fair so that I'm not just out here, flaming everybody, because that's not going to help anybody. Sometimes I want to say, hey, CMMS vendors, be better. But then I have to remind myself, having been that myself in the past, it's really hard to develop one system that works for everyone. That's why I'm always interested in the specificity of what these CMMS providers do. Who do you really serve? Because if you serve manufacturing and schools and hospitals and, on and on like this, I'm starting to think, well,
Yeah.
that's starting to get too wide, the breadth
Yep.
and depth of what they're trying to do. There's cookie cutter solutions also are challenging, but they can be beneficial for people that have never digitized in any way, shape, or form. But then I would say on top of that, whatever you do, whatever you use, make sure your data is yours and you can always take it with you. Have you ever encountered that over your career where you've leveraged the CMMS platform and it's time to make a change? Maybe you've outgrown it. Maybe it's not a bad reason, but you've outgrown it,
Hmm.
and you suddenly find out you can't get your data out of the system.
Yeah. uh, this, maybe the data was just never there.
Okay.
The data was just never there. And I'm going to go from like, here's why I'm basing why I have to go to a new system is I'm using Excel, because a lot of organizations still use that platform to schedule their work. You use what you got. At least you're scheduling it, right? But to take that and put it into a real CMMS is then it's challenging. But I've kind of gone the opposite. I'm going to take your question and kind of take it opposite, where I didn't know what I didn't know until I put all that information into a really good CMMS system. Um, and then it showed me data, and that was eye opening. Because thought we were okay, we're good, and then you put it into something that's can plot that out, give you your PM accuracy, your work requests, your findings. I call them findings, but how many findings you're pulling out of those PMs, and it's like, wow, we're really missing the boat here. Like we're missing it bad. So I think it could go opposite. So you don't know what you don't know until you actually you're able to put some of that data into something that's really user friendly, customer centric, and then you're like, wow, that's big. We have some big
Yeah.
opportunities. Things that we were thought were bad actors. There's bigger bad actors. Those aren't bad actors. These are big actors. So I think it's opposite for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I like that because it reminds me of so many things where, when you say we don't know what we don't know, and what I sometimes put on top of that, until we go. And
Mhm.
there have been many situations throughout my career where I tell somebody, well, if you don't have visibility to, say, for example, these three things, you need to fix that, because only then can you start to see what's really happening. So we start
Right.
with this surface level data, and maybe we've got a really basic CMMS, super easy to use. It doesn't have a bunch of tricked out bells and whistles, because most of the time, none of that crap matters.
Right.
And now we start to see some data build up over a long enough period of time. You get visibility to those things. So
Right.
I've always kind of said, if you don't know what locations you have, what is at those locations when we talk about equipment, right? That
Mhm.
services the building or is leveraged in production or maybe in a warehouse, what things you have there in the way of parts and supplies, where did they come from? How much did they cost?
Yep.
Where are we using them? Those things, in addition to, are we doing appropriate preventive maintenance schedules? Are we keeping up with requests and maybe tasks? That starts to paint in this picture. And then you will invariably discover, wow, we now know this, and this. This system has been great, but we
Hmm.
might have to move on because you've discovered, oh, now I need a true enterprise system that does, this, that, and the other thing, and the over shoulder boulder holder.
Yeah.
So things can change.
And you might get a different director in place where he wants to see the asset health of. I bet in that situation, I want to see the asset health of all my plants. I want to see the assets of all my plants. I want to see the parts room spend of all the plants. I want to be able to do that from my desk or from my yacht or wherever they may be. But hey, guess what? That person's listening. I like what that person is asking for because I want the same thing. But in order
Yeah,
to get that, we're gonna have to make an investment here. So
that's
I
the
think having key leaders in roles like that have listened to their customer, the me's of the world, saying, I want you to have that too. Here's what we need. Here's what we're gonna
yeah.
have to spend.
I think
And
I
I
think
don't
there's a
think they're
lot of
that
that
much
that
money. They're not. I recently got a quote from a CMMS provider, and the costs of them now they're just it's like a no brainer. Why are we still using Excel for $30,000 a year? you can have some of the best CMMS systems on the market.
And on top of that, those platforms will grow in functionality as their user base informs them as to what's really happening. And if they pay attention to, which they will, which ones, kind of resonate across the client base, not everybody's going to get everything they need. The outliers, kind of, if they have too much influence, you start building stuff as a CMMS provider that not everybody in the middle, so to speak, if we're looking at a continuum, are going to
Mhm.
use. But it's really interesting, and we're not going to resolve it. Not on this episode. It's an ongoing conversation, and the whole point of this is that we get to hear from you and some of these things that will resonate with somebody. We maybe get some ideas, and I try to throw a few things in there to get people thinking. And when people listen to podcasts and they pay closer attention, they start thinking about this. Some of it will change a little bit here and a little bit there, and that's all we're really doing. We're chopping
Right.
it up, talking about an industry we care about from all
Absolutely.
different angles, and it helps people. So now I want to switch you into the fun question segment. It's a
Hmm.
requirement for all first-time CMMS radio guests.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
All right. First one. What is your favorite music?
Favorite music. I would probably say Oliver Anthony is playing some of my tunes now. Zach Bryant are kind of my go-to guys that I listen to now. Probably
What's
have been
that
for.
genre?
It's like
All
country-ish.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. All right.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Old Dominion
Fun
is
qu
one of my favorites. I've been to a
Okay.
few Old Dominion concerts, my wife and I, over past 5, 7 years. So yeah,
Good. Good, good. Number
that was an
2.
easy one. Hit me.
Yeah. Number 2, what is your favorite sport or hobby? And on the sport, you don't have to play it. It could be one you like to watch and support and root for.
Baseball. I do. I do. I'm a Michigan guy, so I like the Tigers. Um, but I just enjoy watching baseball. I don't care who's playing. I think it's a fun sport.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It's fun to play and it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the big one. Fun question number 3. What is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, anything at all you have to say about this concept of work-life balance?
um, I'm probably not a good one to answer that because I believe I kind of have the old school mentality. My parents were own their own business. That's all they ever did, and you didn't leave until the job was done, or you had somebody that had equal expectations of your own to take your spot to make sure the job got finished. So for me, I have pretty high expectations, high standards for myself and my teams that I lead. So again, that's why it's tough for me to answer that because I will put in a 24, 26 hour day. Um, it's not healthy, but I don't have a problem doing it. It's what the business needs. That's what I signed up for. And unless I have someone that's has those equal standards and expectations of mine, uh, then I don't leave. But as I'm getting older now, and I've had some feedback from my wife and my daughter that I'm not as young as I used to be. I've tried to put myself in a position where I don't have to do those 16, 20-hour days because, again, it's not healthy. You are a zombie and you do miss key things, especially when you're in leadership role. You get to that point where you can't make decisive decisions when you're on that 16-hour mark. You don't want people talking to you. I'm that way. It's like, don't talk to me, but you're my leader. I'm not providing a good customer service at that point. So, I yeah, I'm at that point where I still think we got to put in a good day's work, and if the job's not done, then you stay until that job is done. Because that's, in my opinion, that's what the business expects us to do. We're paid to do a job, and if the job's not done, then you stay until it's done. And again, I know I'm probably will get flack for that, and you know what, I don't really care because that's my belief. Now, do I expect my team to do that? No, because I feel they have families. I don't want them to be that way. Not everybody's going to have the same work ethics as I do or that you do. I understand that, but that's me. That's how I
Yeah.
believe.
And this is exactly why I asked that particular question last, and why I say it's the big one, because first of all, there are no wrong answers, and it is for us to get people thinking. There's plenty of people that are going to go, "Yep, I roll that way. That's how it is. That's how it goes." So it's awesome. No wrong answers on pretty much any of this stuff, right? So first, I want to thank you for making the time and joining me on CMMS Radio. And for
Thank
everybody
you for
out
having
there,
me.
if you want to get in touch with Matt, oh yeah, man, it's a pleasure. It's Matthew Beach, Mattthew, and it's beach, just like the place you should go on occasion and see the water. Beach. You can find him on LinkedIn. Matt, again, thanks for being here with me on CMMS Radio.
Thank you, Greg. And if I could leave our listeners with one thing, and this is going to sound negative. I like to talk when I leave people with one thought is keep doing you, but better. And that's not negative. It's, if you think about that, is I want you to keep being you, but I want you to think about what you could do better tomorrow. And it's that continuous improvement lifestyle that I live myself is what did I do today that I could have done better? So I'm going to keep being me because this is me, but how do I be better tomorrow for my team, my family? And I think listeners need to think about that. And again, it's not negative. Keep doing you,
Mm.
but better. Just keep being a better you. And I think if we had more people with that thought process, the world would be in a much better position than we are today.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.